friends. My name is Shawne Arceneaux, but you can call me Shawne. I'm a board-certified nurse coach and holistic healer, and I want to help you transform your life in a way that feels in total alignment with your heart and who you truly are. Each week, I'll be sharing with you my tips on how to become more empowered in your own wellness journey and create a vibrant, fulfilling life that reflects your values and your truth. You'll hear insightful interviews on different life and wellness topics and stories from myself and other beautiful souls who share my mission of spreading love and light in this sometimes dark world. My hope for this podcast is that you will walk away feeling inspired and more aligned in your purpose. This is your permission to get curious and lean into your intuition as we all learn and grow together. Welcome to the Aligned and Well podcast. Welcome back to the Aligned and Well podcast. This is officially the first podcast recording of the year of 2024. And I am joined here today by a beautiful human, a beautiful soul who I have had the pleasure of knowing and supporting over the last, 9 to 12 maybe months. I don't know how long we've been working together, but I'm here with Sally Davidson.
Wow.
Sally, I'm just going to let you go and kind of take it away. Just give everyone a short version of who you are, what you do, what you're all about.
Oh, thank you, Shawne. I'm so happy to be here today. Yeah, I'm a nurse. I'm a nurse coach, board certified, and I'm a Shamanic Reiki Master. I am an advanced trained breathwork guide and trauma informed everything that I do. So I do a lot of work with trauma and nervous system regulation and somatic work, and really try to connect all humans, men and women, back to their center. All about connection, connecting back to themselves so they can then connect back out to their communities, whether that's their family, their workplace, whatever it is, and just step into their power. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So many different things. Like, you've got such a wide range of skills, and it was one of my favorite things about working with you is you have so many different things that you're passionate about. Can you talk a little bit about like what kind of led you to this spot right here, like where you're currently at? I mean, I know that's probably like a lot, but if you can kind of summarize a little bit, like from nursing to here, like what brought you down this path of holistic healing?
Sure. So I've always been a little bit way back when. I think even in the beginning of my nursing career, I always had a little woo in me, I would guess. And I always had a little passion for what's out there in the universe. And I was doing muscle testing, Reiki, and women's circles and angel cards before they were a thing, but before they were a thing in my realm. And then I had a chiropractor back then, and I used to call her my witch doctor. She just did all the things and introduced me to a lot. And then she moved, and I kind of just went on with my life and got really busy in my nursing career, moved up the ladder to ICU, oncology ICU, and then ended up in my career in a leadership director of nursing for critical care services. But towards the end of that, I felt a little bit disconnected, and I had found the Nurse Coach Collective, and that really started to change things for me. I was like, wow, there's so much more out there with holistic modalities and really being a little bit more connected. And then COVID hit, and I really didn't do anything with my coaching. I was running a couple ICUs in 2 different hospitals. So my life was really insane, along with everybody else's. But in the meantime, I had like a lot bubbling up. Like, I thought it was burnout from work, which I think was partially, but I can really look back now and see that I think it was just my body being like, we're not working like this or doing life like this anymore. A lot of things were coming up for me physically and mentally. I was having panic attacks. And that really made me stop and reflect on like, what am I doing? And I did blame a lot of it on my job. But I'm not sure, like, I think it was part of it, but I don't think it was all of it anymore. And so I just had a bit of a disconnect with myself. And I really didn't even know who I was anymore. And so I started to explore after the collective, which really started it. And then I started to explore more things and I became a shamanic Reiki master and started studying energy work. And then I did a lot of work with inner alignment with a coach, a mentor of mine. And I do a lot of trauma-based soul retrieval work, really getting to the root of our issues. And I did that work myself first. So I went through a program and had a guide and a mentor and a teacher, coach, whatever you want to call it, and did a lot of work, learned how to meditate and learned how to get to the vibrational level of like where a lot of my trauma was. It was impacting me in my day to day. A lot of times we say, oh, just, forget about it. It's in the past, but it was still showing up for me and it was affecting me. And through there, I was led to breath work, which really has completely changed my life. And the somatic modalities that really allow us to get out of our monkey mind, get into our body and create safety and all these things that we talk about these days. And that's led me to where I am today, coaching my clients, having my own practice, leaving the bedside or leaving my administrative role in the hospital, stepping away, which I know in the entrepreneur world, like we all want to do that. It sounds so glorious, but it's hard as hell, if I can say that, to move from that paycheck and that stability of that job and that status of being in an institution for 27 years and everybody knowing you to stepping out and going on your own and coming into this coaching world, right? But that's where I am, and that's the choice I made. And I had to really make some really big changes in myself and take radical responsibility for my own healing, stop blaming work, society, my parents, whoever I wanted to blame. I mean, they were a part of my story, but I had to really take responsibility for my healing. And yeah, that's where I am today with my clients and my journey. And the more I let my grip loose on how things are going to turn out, the more I start to open up. And so it's been a journey for me. I've been in the entrepreneur, I think it's been a couple of years now. I'm always bad with dates, but yeah, so that's kind of where I am today.
Yeah. 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 So many things really stood out to me as you were talking just there. And one of the things I really wanted to highlight was that feeling of like disconnection that you were talking about at your job, right? Like you started to feel really disconnected from yourself. And I imagine the people listening who do feel pretty disconnected to themselves, what's like the tangible thing that you can identify that you noticed that made you go, oh my gosh, I'm disconnected. I don't feel connected to myself. Like, what was there a process that you kind of had to go through mentally, emotionally to kind of get to all of these other modalities that you've discovered?
Yeah, it wasn't like one day I woke up and said, "Oh, I'm so disconnected." I didn't even
Right.
probably know what that meant.
Right.
I didn't wake up and say, "Oh, I don't feel safe in my body." I didn't know what that meant. It was more of a slow cultivation of like I just didn't feel right. And I know I have a lot of clients sometimes that like something just seems off. And it was very easy in that time to blame COVID, to blame the toxic hospital environment, to blame administration, to blame, so many things. And I think they played a part, but I think my internal disconnect truly was my own. It was just a time in my life that I believe that my body was just like, you can't work like this and do life like this anymore. And if you don't listen, which you're not, we're going to stop you, which it did. And so the disconnect was really about just feeling unhappy in everything, unhappy at work, unhappy in my personal life, angry, resentful.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to matter what was going to be put in front of me. They just promoted me to director of nursing. I had been not really on the trajectory for that, but it was nice, right? To be in my career in that moment in time, and nothing felt good.
Yeah.
I guess was the biggest thing. If I really think back and feel into like where I was at that moment, nothing was going to satisfy me. Nothing was feeling good. And I remember being in my therapist's office because I'm a proponent of therapy and coaching and creating a life that you want and it started in therapy for me. And I
Mhm.
remember him asking me something about like what I liked or something. And I was like, I I I remember having this moment of like, I don't even know who I am. Like,
Mm.
I don't do I like red or do I like blue? Do I like roses or do I like daisies? Do I like to work? Do I want to be like, I don't even know.
Mm.
And those were the moments where I was like, something's not right.
Yeah, yeah, totally. This is making me think of, because many people who are listening to this podcast right now know that I just had a baby and like, 8 months ago. And I was talking with my therapist about feeling like having these moments of feeling super disconnected from my son, from the people in my life, from my business sometimes. Like I just feel super disconnected and like I immediately like it manifests in a lot of the ways that you were just talking about, resentment, just wanting to totally shut down, not knowing who I am, like having all of these thoughts of like what is going on? Like something feels so off and I don't know what it is. Like on paper I have an
Mhm.
awesome life and I don't get it. And she was, we kind of talked a little bit about the polyvagal theory. So that's what this kind of reminds me of. Like there's a part of the nervous system where like, essentially we're this sounds dramatic, but like we're so overwhelmed that we're like preparing for death because
Yeah.
we don't know how to handle what's coming at us. And so it like leads to this like shutdown mode. And I know in your work, whenever you're working with people to reignite that connection with themselves, that fire in themselves, how do you pull people out of that? Like where do you start?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a good question because sometimes I have trouble pulling myself out. I'll be
Right,
in
right.
complete honesty, right? But I think it's important as a coach or a guide that we are honest because
Maybe that's where
I,
we could start. How do you pull yourself out first? And then how do you
yeah,
get your
because I
client?
mean nobody wants to go to somebody that,
Totally.
hasn't experienced these things. And so for a while it was really hard to pull myself out. I just was in that freeze mode. I realized after a while that that's obviously a trauma response, just like you're
Mhm.
talking about. Like, because at that moment in time where I recognized I didn't even know who I was, I just want to go back to what you said. I was probably in the best place in my life. Like
Yeah.
on paper, also.
Yeah.
I was in a I had partnership with my husbands. My kids were doing good. My stepkids, everybody was doing kind of good on their path. Had a great job. Yes, it was stressful. Yes, we just got through COVID. But on paper, the same thing. Like, what's her problem? But
Right.
inside, I was like dying,
Mm.
like literally felt like you're dying.
Mhm.
And for a while, I couldn't pull myself out. I took time off of work. I really dove headfirst into healing, therapy, and other therapies.
Mhm.
I did this inner alignment work, which I do with my clients now. And it was an 8-week program at the time. And it was really intense, learning how to meditate and set up my practices and forgiveness work and just tapped
Yeah.
into all those things and did some somatic soul retrieval work where we really went to the vibrational level. So I did a lot of work with guides and help that I didn't know how to do. And that helped me somewhat pull myself out. Now I have to remember that these emotions are just an emotion.
Mhm.
They're just a vibration. And that was like a real learning lesson to me. Like the story that I put behind that feeling is a story. And then I would go down the rabbit hole of the story. And then I would sink deeper into this feeling.
Mhm.
But it's just a passing vibration. And if I started to learn how to hit those head on. I'm not anxiety. I'm just feeling anxious right now. I'm not anxiety. I'm not
Yeah.
anger. I'm just feeling a little angry right now. But I used to try to suppress it and then I would get resentful and then I would get really angry and then I would maybe throw something. So now I have started to learn how to hit those head on and embrace them and show myself compassion. And it sounds so easy, but it's not. I mean, it's a learned behavior, right? I really had to rewire my brain
Totally.
literally to rewire my brain, and it's still not always perfectly wired. But I have a great example. The other day, I did a breathwork session online, and I had done a couple workshops, and I'm sometimes resistant, which you know as my coach, but sometimes
Mhm.
resistant to workshops. And so I did two on the solstice, and they were beautiful, and they went in my head perfect, and whatever that it means. And then I did one on New Year's, and I had trouble with the sound, and I could tell some people were antsy. And
Mm.
when you start, if you've never been in a breath work online, once you start the music and you really can't stop. You have to just go through and try to fix it.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that, plus trying to stay grounded and in the moment, very important for my energy to maintain during work like that, because I don't want to be all in my head. And so I got through it, and then I started to go down that rabbit hole. And after, like, oh my God, what happened? I had 27 people. And I started to do this whole narrative of one of my protectors, one of my shameful, judgy, I call her Judy. She's very judgy. And she comes out and she was judging me. And she was like, oh my God. And then you go right to that I suck kind of thing, if I can say that.
Yeah.
And how I pull myself out, and I know that I've had growth, is because I only got about 2 steps down the rabbit hole,
Mhm.
about 2 steps. And
Yeah.
then I was like, not doing this today, Judy. I love you, and I know you're upset, but we're gonna just show you some love." And I just said, "I'm human, and it's technology, and sometimes technology just doesn't work."
Mhm.
And yes, it was sketchy. And I ended up writing about it, because sometimes that is helpful to any of us, right?
Yeah.
It depends on what your way of release is. Sometimes for me, it's meditation, sometimes it's journaling. And so in that instance, I wrote a post,
Mhm.
and I basically said everything I was feeling in the post around that. Judy came out and she immediately made me feel like I sucked. And, but I don't. And data shows I don't.
Mhm.
And I'm not perfect. And I just kind of wrote it out, and then I just posted it, and I wasn't looking for validation. I wasn't looking for anyone to say, you know, you're great, you're not great. I just needed to like get it out in that venue at that moment. And I did. And I didn't waste the rest of my night. In the past, I might have wasted the rest of my night worrying about that.
Yeah.
And so it takes time and it takes cultivation. And I think, going back to the initial question, which I know I got off the path a little,
You're good.
but for me it was daily practices. So my meditation, my breath work, my presence, my slowing down, creating my nervous system to be a little bit more regulated. And also having a coach, a guide, a therapist,
Mhm.
whatever, because I knew, for me, it was going to be hard for me to do that alone.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Totally.
years of programming.
Yeah. I really truly think that, I mean, people aren't meant to do this kind of work alone. I mean, I feel like you certainly can. It would just take a long ass time. Like, it would just
Mhm.
take so long. And it's so helpful to have another nervous system helping you regulate yours when you're really activated. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love therapy and coaching, is because when I'm like up in the clouds up here and like in my mind, and all of my defense mechanisms are up, all of my protectors are out, it's really nice to have another nervous system who is grounded in their like center to be able to bring me back down, you know?
Right. Because sometimes it just takes a reframing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just talking to someone, and she was telling me a story, which just, I don't know, makes sense to repeat it right now. And she was saying a story about when her daughter was 4, how she brought her this picture of, and she said, "Mommy, I found you in the book." And so mom was thinking, oh, she found, like, I don't know, Pocahontas, or it was like a princessy kind of thing. And she brought her, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Maleficent.
Maleficent. Yeah.
Maleficent. I can never say it right. And so she was saying that her initial reaction was, "Oh my God, like my daughter at 4 thinks I'm like have horns." And
Yeah.
but It wasn't that. It was, and she had texted her friend and said, "Oh, oh my gosh." And, it was her immediate reaction to go there. And her friend said, "No, I think she sees like this powerful, creative, like person."
Mhm.
And so it just took that reframing from a friend, honestly. And then she was able to look back, and her daughter didn't come and be like, "Oh my God, I see this person and this is you." And it's like scary. It was like her daughter, her 4-year-old, was excited
Yeah.
because I think she saw this powerful character. And then she attributed that to her mom, who she probably thinks is like this powerful being who dresses a certain way. And so she just told me this story today. So
So
I
good.
just, the reframing of that, of like, you could take it this way because our mind tells us all these stories and we automatically want to go there. But really, when you reframed it, it, it was really beautiful that her 4-year-old was seeing this, like, kind of larger than life, powerful, even though she has horns and all this stuff. But that's not the way the 4-year-old was really seeing it. And so
Yeah.
it just took someone to reframe it for her to then be like, "Oh, yeah, but I can easily go. I could easily go the other day to like, I suck. And this isn't, and I'm not going to do another workshop. I'm not going to do another breath work because that might happen again. And it might happen again.
Mhm.
And it might not. Right. So I celebrating and showing yourself compassion and teaching your clients, when I have clients like that, just me just reframing for them and showing them, like, how does that really look?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what does that really look like if it was just a little bit to the left versus a little bit to the right? Or how does that feel differently? Or could it be this? Because sometimes we just need someone to reflect it back to us because we are so up in the,
Yeah.
you
So
know
much
me.
so.
I'm like, sometimes I'm like, woo, baby. Like, you can't even like bring me back. But if I stayed there, oh my God, that's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I used to stay. I used to stay there, and probably I will still stay there sometimes. But and my clients, it's not perfect, right? Because we are living in this human experience called life in this vessel, and we're living human lives. I mean, you just had a baby. There's so many things with that.
Mhm.
And so to feel that, I remember my second baby, I literally had so much postpartum, but nobody
Mhm.
wanted to talk about it. I felt so disconnected. I had a 3-year-old at home. I had a husband who was like, out to lunch, no longer my husband. I had a mom who thought everything should just be like, and I felt like all I did was cry.
Yeah.
And here I just had a baby. I was supposed to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
And
my
no one,
gosh.
that was 36 years ago. Nobody wanted to talk about that. Like, nobody even wanted to hear what I had to say. So, yeah, that's how the disconnect came. And I think it's a slow cultivation to bring yourself out and to be loving with yourself and your clients, to be like, because everybody's different, like how you birthed a baby and how you feel emotionally in your nervous system is different than how somebody next to you. And then we tend to have the comparison gene, I
Mhm.
have it strongly. And the more I loosen that grip, the more life seems so much better.
Yeah.
And so just allowing your experience to be your experience, my client's experience to be their experience, not making my experience their experience or their experience my experience.
Yeah. Earlier, you were talking a little bit about like knowing that an emotion is just an emotion, right? And I think that the whole connection piece is not identifying with that, like almost like you're observing it from a higher perspective. And connection to yourself really means connection to this like higher power, whatever you want to call it, that is you. It's not the emotions you're feeling, it's not the external circumstances you're going through. It's totally separate. Like everything that's happening to you and everything that you're thinking and like all of those things, everything that you're feeling is not actually you. And there's that whole thing about like, like who actually are you, right? And that's a huge question because everybody has such a different answer for that. But I love to think of being like being a human being and being connected with myself to others. It's all about this awareness, this observation of what's going on, and having this like thing that connects us all, that we are all, like you said, vessels
Right.
walking around on this
And
earth.
we can connect to that energy in the larger community. Like we can actually connect energy, right? It's energy. So, I mean, I experienced that this summer in San Diego. I went to a retreat, an advanced breathwork retreat, which was a lot of energy work and a lot of female embodiment. And we really sat with ourselves present and connected to ourselves and our vibration. You could kind of feel your energy. And then we connected to a person across from us. And
Mm,
then we connected to the room.
yeah. Oh,
We interconnected to the energy of the room, and I'm gonna tell you, Shawne, I have never, ever felt anything like that.
yeah.
And people can call it woo, people can call it whatever they want, but there is a connection that if we slow down enough and
Yeah.
we tap in, and now this was a room of 50 people who were all there for the same reason. So we had this, vision and everybody was pretty open, but you could feel the difference.
Mm,
And when I meditate, I feel like a pulsing inside of me. I feel like a pulsing that kind of goes back and forth, almost like I'm rocking. I feel like I'm rocking when I'm really dropped in. And
mhm.
this, when I connected to the greater community, the interconnected wovenness of the energy, it was a spinning sensation in my body, like
Ooh,
a
yeah.
kundalini energy. And it was a definite shift. It went from this to this, all the way
Yeah.
up and down, and I was like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
It was I was between crying and laughing because it was so pleasurable, and that's like a whole 'nother thing I could talk
Yeah.
about, but it's so pleasurable, and it was almost like a little bit unnerving, like, "What is this?" But
So true. Yeah.
it was amazing. It was amazing that you could tap in to that with just a little guidance, and you
Mhm.
could tap into the energy of the field because that was the energy of the field. And right, I think Joe Dispenza talks a lot about that
Yeah.
and the quantum and the field. But I am 100% sure that day I tapped into the field in San
Yeah.
Diego. It was mind blowing, something
Wow.
I will never forget. So we have that ability to be connected, to be present, and to tap in to that energy with our clients, with our family. But if we don't, with our coworkers, but if I am a firm believer, if we don't tap in and be present first with ourselves,
Yeah.
then it's hard to then bring that energy level up so that we can then connect with the greater community.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking about your experience, it's first of all, it sounded amazing, and it really reminded me it
It
really
was
reminded
insane.
me of a retreat that I went to recently where we did a plant medicine ceremony. I'm sure you've heard about it. We did a plant medicine ceremony, and I was the first to go, right? So I was the first to go. We were in a room of like maybe 12 other women, and I didn't realize that we were just all going to be watching each other going through this experience as the shaman kind of like went and administered the medicine to each of us. So I was first, and I just remember feeling very similar to what you were describing, like a spinning sensation, almost like I was like floating. And and then I just felt this like huge release. I started to cry. I started to have this intense emotional response. I felt this huge connection, this really deep connection to myself and to like my heart. And then I could feel in the room everybody holding space for me. It's like it's almost like I could feel all of them like embracing me in the room, and nobody was touching me. I mean, eventually one did come up and give me a hug and like embrace me, but it was just this amazing experience. So like that connection, and it doesn't take much. Like it doesn't have to take a plant medicine ceremony or whatever you experience
No,
either to cultivate that, but it's
right.
accessible, you know?
It is accessible. I mean, and with breath work, it's accessible. I mean, every time that I facilitate breath work, I tap into the field, maybe not on that level that I did in San Diego because I don't kind of allow myself probably to go there because I'm facilitating,
Mm.
but I usually say to people like, "Oh, that's like juicy." They probably think I'm such a weirdo, but I'm like, I can feel it because it's like that's all I can think about. It's like juicy for me. It's like almost like the cell phone's being plugged in, like I'm being plugged in, even when I'm facilitating, because I'm in that rooted, grounded place where I am serving. Really, I'm not sure I'm even serving at that point. I am just facilitating, but something's coming through me. And that for the listeners, you can believe that or not, woo or not. But when you're serving from that really, really grounded, rooted place, things change, your voice changes.
Mm, mhm,
You are calm. You can definitely tell a difference in my voice, in my cadence. I don't do that on purpose. It is because I'm serving from a different place. And when I do my healing work too, my soul retrievals, I get into this place that is you're serving more, I think, and same with Reiki. I am just the vessel for the service, and I just the intuitive hits come through. So I don't have a script. I'm not doing a workshop. I'm just really intuitively doing it. And it's easy and it feels good for me as much as it feels good for the client.
mm,
I don't feel like energy depleted after I do those types of sessions. And
mhm.
that's when I know I'm really in it because it feels good. It feels good in my body. And so to know that we have that ability to tap into that, whether it's through breath work, through meditation, through learning how to just connect to the field,
Or
but
even
to
to,
do
like,
any of that,
nature, like, I think of
right?
going
Grounding, going
outside and
out.
sitting out
Yeah,
on the grass.
right. Because what it, and I think sometimes, and I just talked about this today too, sometimes we think it has to look a certain way.
Mhm.
So, what regulates my nervous system? Because there's a lot of data about meditation and this and that. So I think it's all great, right? But it may not be the same for you that it is for me. And it may be that I have a morning practice. And yes, there's a lot of data on the practices being in the morning to set you up. But there's a lot of people that are shift workers or night workers or whatever. And it may be that it's an evening practice for them. Or for some, it may be that their biggest practice is journaling. Or for some, it may be that theirs is nature, that is their meditation. And so I just say to people, be curious when you're creating that it doesn't have to look like your neighbor's looks, right? Because our nervous systems are set up similar, but again, we're individuals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So our nervous system isn't going to react. My trauma is different than yours. My lineage is different than yours. And then my nervous system is going to be a little bit different. I mean, the meat and potatoes of it's probably the same, right? But what we've brought to it is so different. So what it's going to take for me to regulate and what it's going to take for you to regulate may not be the same thing. And that's perfectly okay. It doesn't have to be that everybody has a 1 hour morning practice.
Yeah. I
And I
love
think people are get caught up in that.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I love how individual a connection can be, like connection to self, connection to others, connection to source. Like it can be so many different things. I had no idea. It took me being on maternity leave, stuck in my house for so long to know that, like, if I don't get outside at least once, I have a higher chance of feeling really disconnected to everything else in my life. There's something about walking outside with the cold air on my face, even if it's raining. Like, I live in Seattle, right? It rains here all the time, but I love it. I love getting outside in the rain and being with the element. Like, it's just that is like my connection anchor, I guess. But I know that's not everybody else's jam, too. We were just
Right. And
talking
that's
about how
perfectly
everyone can have
okay.
such a different outlet, a different practice. And so for you, whenever you work with people, I mean, how do you go about helping people discover like what their thing is to help them feel more connected to themselves?
So if they're open, I have a program I do with inner alignment and I take them through some really woo, like violet flame meditations and work with the flame within your heart space and really talk a lot about that. And that's for my clients that are like open. Like they're open to that. We do lineage work and forgiveness work because people are really opposed to like feel a lot of resistance around forgiveness work because they think if there's been some kind of trauma, they think that if forgiveness only means one thing in this country, like we're going to forgive that person. And then that means like it didn't happen. But that's not really what forgiveness work is. It's really about forgiving ourselves for whatever shame, whatever we're holding on to. So I like to create a morning practice or a practice and start the nervous system regulation process, the slowing down, the presence.
Mhm.
If I find that a client is resistant to certain things, I ask them to get curious to what the
Mhm.
resistance is from.
Mhm.
And but there are people that are just not ready for that, maybe that spiritual end. So then we just try to find like what is going to work for them. I have a lot of people, a lot of clients that are very resistant to meditation. They just don't think they can do it. They don't think they can slow down enough. They can't. Their mind is over. And so I know that they probably can meditate, but they're just probably not going to be there. And that's when I started really getting into breath because
Yeah.
I think
Body,
breath is a
yeah. Mhm.
great bait and switch, I call it. The great bait and switch.
Totally.
'Cause they're like, "I can't meditate. I'm not meditating. I don't have time." And then I'm like, "Okay, so we're gonna do, not this big meditative journey. We're gonna start with 10 alternate nostril breaths. We're
Yep.
gonna start with 10 box breaths. Do it in your car before
Mhm.
you go into work." Like, there's always a place to do that,
Mhm.
and the more they get into the breath, and then they get to these meditative journeys where they're longer, 60 minutes. That's why I call it the bait and switch, because your monkey mind can focus on the breath. So you don't feel like you have to release your mind of all thoughts, which is not true in meditation either, but people
Yeah.
can't get past, which is fine.
No.
It's not a judgment. It's just what it is. It's a fact.
Right.
And so on the breath, they can focus on the breath. And then as they focus on the breath, there's physical things that happen, right? We get down to that vagus nerve, the parasympathetic kicks in, and that those are factual things that happen with breath.
Mhm.
And then before they know it, we kind of drop underneath all that resistance.
Yeah.
And what I say to clients is even if you are resistant, you think all this is woo and too spiritual, whatever you think, you can leave dinner and go in the bathroom. If someone at dinner is aggravating you, you're out to dinner with your family and they're getting on your last nerve, you can go in the bathroom, shut the stall, and you can do 10 to 15 breaths. And I guarantee you,
You'll feel
you will
different.
not feel the
Yeah.
same at the first breath, at the 15th breath.
Mhm.
And you could do it sitting on the toilet. I mean, honestly, not to be, but I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
You're not going to go in there and meditate, but you can use your own breath.
Mhm.
And it gives you something to focus on. And then once you focus and it becomes rhythmic, you start to just go
Mhm.
down and
Yeah.
your nervous system starts to regulate. And so I think everything isn't going to work for everybody.
Mhm. Yeah.
Some
It
people
really
don't
is
want to be
trial and
outside.
error.
It is, but sometimes the resistance is so strong, we wanna still give people some ability to feel like they have a say,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
not my way or the highway kinda thing. As coaching, we're co-creating. So sometimes I wanna be able to give them the options of because their body may still feel very unsafe and very like, "I can't do this," and then they're not gonna do anything,
Yeah, totally.
right?
That's like the
Like, "I
idea of
can't do this."
titrating, right? Like taking
Oh,
things in
yes.
little sips and like,
Mhm,
especially if you're not used to doing practices like that, if you're not doing used to doing somatic work or body-based practices, it can feel like once you start to notice the effects of doing practices like that, it can feel a little bit frightening too, because
mhm.
then it's, I know for me, like, I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but for me, whenever I started doing body based practices like that, a part of me did want to stop because I was afraid of what things were going to come up, what things were going to bubble to the surface, what
Right.
things I was going to have to face. And there is that element of, if if we're not looking at the hard thing, we don't have to deal with it, you know? Um,
Yeah, I come across that a lot when I do my soul retrieval work, which is definitely somatic in feeling, and we're taking a current trigger, and then we're current trigger for today. And I use the example, my husband, every time I go away, buys something else to put on the counter. And I had a very illogical response to that.
mhm.
So it wasn't really about the counter. It was about lack of control, right? I ask you not to do this, you do it, and I'm in control if you just listen to me, right? Like it's old. And so we take the current trigger and then we go back and we feel into the sensation of like what happens when you're having your fight with your partner, like where do you feel that? And so a lot of clients can kind of fall in and like start to get to that feeling, and then we pull up an old memory, and then next thing they're back and they're 5 and we kind of address it there. But I've had a lot of clients that they just can't even get past.
Mm-hmm.
They're so resistant. And this is not a judgment. It's more about they just are, their armor is so thick. And so then it's about, I'm doing it wrong because we're not getting through. And so I had to like kind of relook at that and be like, okay, I don't really think this is going to work right now, today, maybe next week with this client. So
Mm-hmm.
what are we going to do so that they don't leave here feeling like they were wrong because they're a perfectionist, an overachiever, and their armor is solid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they do not wanna go in. Like, they lot like, mentally, physically, emotionally, anywhere in their multiple layers, they're not ready. And so then I adjust. I adjust, and I'd be like, "Okay, so let's visualize it. Let's just visualize a safe place," and just slowly creating safety for them because I just don't think for me, it's just not cookie cutter.
Yeah. Yeah. It can't
Some
be.
things work for some things work for a lot of people, but then you're always gonna have clients that it's not gonna work for, and that doesn't mean I'm not a good coach or you're not a good coach, or it means like, okay, we have to readjust because this is a human being living their human experience. And so we want them to feel safe. I always want people to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I want to do is re-traumatize anyone or have anyone like really relive their trauma. There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, that's never happened with the somatic work. I think that's scary for some people because they think like they're going to relive this really, really traumatic experience. I have not experienced that for myself yet. I've had memories that are traumatic, but they've been dealt with in a like a beautiful, like needing to get out kind of way. And that's what I've experienced for my clients. So I just think, it's great to have different tools so that you can slow down because we are in a world where it's very much hustle, hustle, get it done. So allowing that sometimes it's slower. And sometimes a client is like, well, that's not what I want. And then I usually just try to be like, well, kind of this is where we're at though. And like we
Yeah.
don't want to take it too fast because their mind may be ready, but their body is clearly not ready.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a
100%.
disconnect between the mind body connection, then their mind is going to be like, I'm so ready.
Yeah. And then
But their
get frustrated
body,
whenever it doesn't work.
yeah. And then they're maybe mad at me or mad at you.
Yeah.
There's all things as a coach or a healer, but I do know that, like, it has to be slow. I've experienced this. I've done a ton of my own work, but I kind of lately wasn't doing as much of my own, like, somatic work. Like, yes, I'm a breathwork facilitator, but I wasn't breathing. I'm breathing in the mornings, but I'm not doing, like, I think as much as my body actually needed. And I was hitting a bunch of blocks, as you know, and I went to a craniosacral woman, and she was saying to me, like, "Do you feel okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." She's like, "Are you uncomfortable?" I'm like, "Nope." I just met her. It's the first time I went to her. And, craniosacral, for people that don't know, like, she just was holding my head. She's an energy worker. And she could tell that my body didn't feel safe. My mind felt safe. I was completely
Mm,
comfortable with her. But she was saying to me, "It seems like you're uncomfortable with me." And I'm like, I'm like, not uncomfortable. I'm
yeah.
not comfortable with physical touch, but my body. And so what I took from that was, wow, I think I need to step more back into some more personal somatic work, body work, because
Mm-hmm.
my body has come a long way, but there's still some strong protectors there saying this isn't safe. And it takes a while for our clients to even understand that connection or disconnection, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I didn't understand it as a nurse. I mean, and we're nurses. I totally never
This is
even
something that
understood
boggles
any of
my mind. Yeah. It's something that like really it blows my mind because a lot of this stuff there are science-based explanations for all of the like woo stuff that we're really into, right? And it's not even like mentioned in
right.
training as a nurse or in nursing school. Like we don't really get any kind of exposure to some of this stuff. And when I think about the nursing profession, this is why I love how we have found this nurse coaching. And it's really sad that it's not more mainstream. I think it's becoming more mainstream. But whenever I think of connection, I also think of safety too, right? Like you can't feel connected if you're in survival mode. And so creating that, and I know for sure that there have been times in my own life where I didn't even realize that I felt unsafe. And I think we both probably
Oh,
experience that with our clients
100%.
all the time too, of like they didn't even realize that they felt that way, just as you were talking about in that story. Your mind felt totally fine, but your body, there was something about it. I love going into like the wisdom of the body. It has so much wisdom, it has so much information for us to acknowledge, to process through, and we don't
And she
even
could feel
realize.
that by my on
Yeah.
just her hands on my head, and she was definitely a strong energy worker. She's probably in her 70s, almost just doing it part-time now, and I met her at a breathwork group session in person, and then she wanted to trade services, and so I tend to do that in my community a little bit. I trade back and forth, and but she picked up on that right away, and I was a little resistant when she said it. I was like,
Mm.
I literally am fine. Like, I was, like, annoyed, not with her, with myself, like, "Oh my god, like, how much." But honestly, when I really thought back and I really got real with myself, I'm like, "Yeah, I've done a lot of work, but honestly, I've been doing a lot of other work, but I don't know that I've been really maybe cultivating my own safety again in my body." And it was years and years and years. It wasn't like 1 year of being unsafe, like, it was years of that fight or flight and freeze mode and trauma responses. So, it's not gonna be gone in a couple of years. It's just not. Like,
Yeah.
your body holds so much wisdom and holds onto a lot of our stuff, we don't even probably know half of it.
Yeah.
And
I feel like a
so
lot of nurses experience that too. I mean, there's a lot of nurses that listen to this, and just the nature of the job. There's a lot that we hold on to from just that, from just being nurses.
right, we think trauma has to be just because, you had a rough childhood, and people will say, "Well, I had great parents and I had a great upbringing." It isn't always about that. It
Yeah.
can be your mom worked. Like, I
Mhm.
worked a lot when kids were young. I'm sure that I didn't see it then, but that I'm sure had a huge impact on them. And then I worked all kinds of crazy shifts, and then,
Mhm.
people work nights and then they weren't home. I mean, it wasn't like anything on purpose. Or then they just go into healthcare. And then, the pandemic alone,
Oh,
we started to
yes.
get them. But just think about working in an ICU or an oncology unit. It's part of the job. It's part of
Mhm.
the job to not pee or eat for 12 hours, like,
Mhm.
that's expected, and I was a manager and a director, and I, like, bought into that stuff too, like, "Oh, you work 12 hours, 3 days a week, you can't work another shift." I mean, honestly, my mentality was there.
Yeah.
Not now, but it was, and so all of that adds up, and so even if in our mind, we're not thinking, I don't think any of us feel like, well, I don't wanna say we never feel unsafe, but I did not understand the unsafety in my body. I never
Mhm.
knew it was a thing, but now I'm understanding it more, and it is a process, and that's why in my breath work, I'm all about, like, crazy breath work and Wim Hof and all these things. I don't think there's anything wrong with any types of breath work, right? There's something for everybody, but I have to say I tend to definitely nurture and allow, like, I wanna cultivate
Mhm.
safety, 'cause I think that's important because I do think you can have a really, really great experience and
Mhm.
a release from that, and then there's time for the screaming, and there's time for the bigger releases, but I do think cultivating safety in people's body, and that's probably based on my own trying to cultivate my own safety, right? So,
Mhm.
mm,
Yeah.
because I don't wanna scare people away
Totally.
because these are such great healing modalities, even when people don't know they have something to heal.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they don't have to talk about it. I was just talking to someone the other day about, like, men, because I do have mostly women clients, but I do have some male clients and some male breathwork clients. But trying to tap into more of the males for the breathwork because mental health in for men, right? They're not really allowed to come forward and say it's like a weakness. And so they don't have to really talk about it in breathwork. They just can release it.
Mhm.
So being able to tap into that more because I think it's needed for
Mhm.
everybody. So
Yeah,
it's not a
healing
stigma.
doesn't have to be just talking
Mental
about
health,
it. It can be like experiencing it
right.
too, right? Like experiencing it, releasing it, and not having to like intellectualize it. I think that's a tendency that a lot of people have now. And, sometimes I do too, is like the need to intellectualize it, the need to describe it, to talk about it, to process it verbally. Like I'm a very verbal processor. So sometimes it frustrates me when I can't put something into words. And
Yeah, I can relate to that because sometimes I have to even,
yeah,
if someone's telling me something, I have to sometimes repeat it to them because that is the way I process it. So someone may be telling me something and then I will have to say it almost back to them. And I'm sure it's annoying for some people, but it is the way I process. And if I have big feelings, I sometimes have to process them and
yeah.
articulate
Mm-hmm.
that way. But to me, I have found that it only goes so far, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there's still all this stuff that just needs to come out.
Yeah. I I remember working with one of my previous coaches. He was a human design coach, and shout out to Robert if you're listening to this. I know he sometimes listens to my podcast. He would always tell me, like, every time I started to get every time I was talking through something and I started to get really wordy and over explainy, he would tell me to stop, close my eyes, take a deep breath, and then answer. And he's like, it's okay if you don't have words. It's okay if you don't need to try to put labels or anything on it. And he could feel like if I didn't have words for something, but I felt it, and like I felt it in my body and I could feel my energy shift, he could see it through the screen. He could feel it too.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's like where the really good stuff is, right? When you don't have words, when you can just feel it in your body. I think for
Yeah. And I
me,
think
oh yeah, go ahead.
we struggle. No, I was just going to say we struggle with that. I had a client that was struggling
Yeah.
with things that with like who she's going to serve. And so
Mm,
I said, okay, like we kind of went round and round and I said, okay, I want you to just like lay back wherever she was sitting, close your eyes, take a
mhm.
couple of breaths. And I just did a little bit of visualization. And then like she knows what she wants to do. And then it was able easily come out. But sometimes it's so hard for us, myself included, as a coach of me,
Yeah.
like to slow down. But when we slow down and we become present in the moment and we ground and we get into that place, everything changes.
Mhm.
And even like I said, our voice changes, the tone of our voice changes because we are delivering that message from a different place. We're not delivering it from up here in
Yeah.
our heady kind of like mind way. We're really delivering it from our heart or our root, and it comes out different and it's more clear. But
Mhm.
sometimes because we're in this world where there's so much commotion and so many things that we forget how to slow down, and I'm definitely guilty of like
Oh yeah.
struggling with that sometimes,
Mhm.
getting caught in the middle of the spiral of the tornado.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I feel like this is a topic that we could talk about for hours and
Yeah.
hours. But to kind of wrap things up, like what for someone out there who feels like they are possibly disconnected with themselves and maybe has a little bit of awareness of it, or maybe they're very aware of it, what would be your like top 3 pieces of wisdom for them to start getting that connection back, to start reconnecting with themselves?
Yeah, the first thing I think I would say is really just slow down.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like slow down and just look internally, which is hard in the beginning, but if you're feeling like it's my job or my spouse, my partner, my kids, whatever you think is like creating that disconnection, really just slow down. Take a week or two just to kind of try to slow your schedule down, slow yourself down, and really start to be a little introspective about what's really happening.
Mhm.
Because most of the time, it is not the outside stuff.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's not about a blame game. It's more about like an internal accountability, an external checklist of like what's really going on here. And then I think the second thing is when you're starting to feel like that, it's really sometimes hard to do any of that and get like on track or start to get even grounded on your own.
Mhm.
So whether it's a coach or a therapist or someone that can help you kind of even get started. There's so many things in the new year that are free, like all these free challenges. And I've seen so many like beautiful challenges people have out. So there's so many things on the internet, everything like if financially, like I can't afford a coach or I can't afford this, that can be a whole other podcast of what you prioritize. But for now, just stopping and slowing down and finding something that's going to keep you present daily.
Yeah.
Whether that's a short meditation, whether it's getting outside and taking a break, whether it's sitting in your car, because what I hear a lot from people is, I don't have time. So whether you're going to a job or whatever, sitting in your car. I used to think I was the only weirdo that did this, but apparently it's a big thing to sit in your car.
I love sitting in my car.
Me too. My husband will call me. He'll be like, what are you doing out there?
He'll see me on the Ring camera and he'll be like, what are you doing?
I'm like, nothing. I'm just kind of thinking. I'm kind of thinking about things. Yeah, I do it too. And I don't even have small kids at home and I still do it.
Right.
So take 10 minutes in your car just to kind of collect yourself, collect your thoughts. There's so many apps and meditations, but those are like the easy things I think that you can do. But I think when you really feel that like resentment and disconnection, reaching out to, it is not a weakness to reach out, ask for help, ask for guidance. Most of us have been through it.
Yeah.
I only use modalities that I have used for myself.
Same.
I really use only modalities that have been helpful to me and that I feel. So many people experience the same things. We're just different. So don't hide. It's like, let's normalize what's going on. This is what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
And like, let's normalize it. But I think slowing down because we live in a very fast-paced world.
Totally. Oh, yes. I resonated with so much of that. Well, where can people find you? I know you have like an exciting launch coming up, but where can people hang out with you?
My business is Rooted Soul, but most of my stuff is under SallyDavidsonCoach.com. My Instagram is Sally Davidson Coach. My Facebook is Sally Davidson. And I have a huge launch. This will launch after that. But yeah, in January, I'm launching my podcast, The Connection Project, and it's talking all things connection. And I've been having the most amazing time doing this and just really talking about the connection and how important connection is to self, community, talking about the social media connection and disconnection, the technology connection, disconnection, all things. So once you hear this, check it out. And also doing some launches for breathwork. So yeah, you can find all that on my pages and my Instagram if you follow me. And yeah, I'm doing a retreat in March. Just a couple spots left. So that's all there for you to see.
All of those links for any of you who want to check out all of the amazing things that Sally's doing, they will all be in the show notes for you. I am so glad that I was able to get you on to do this with me. First interview of the year, launching your own podcast, like just as your coach, as your mentor. I'm so proud of you. You know, like it's been such an honor to be a witness to your arising. Like you're so, whenever I think of connection, you're one of the first people that comes to mind, is because not only have I gotten to witness you falling deeper and deeper into connection with yourself, but deeper and deeper into connection with your business, with your clients. Like I'm getting teary-eyed talking about this. It's just been so, so beautiful to watch. So thank you so much, Sally, for being here with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shawne. It was a pleasure to be here and an honor.
Yeah, awesome. Well, if you guys enjoyed this episode and want to hear more interviews like this, feel free to send me an email or a DM. I'd love to hear from you guys and know what other topics you'd like me to dive into, what other kind of guests you'd like to hear. I also have a free Facebook group called the Aligned and Well Community. I'd love for you to join, hang out with us there. That link will be in the show notes as well. I hope you guys have a wonderful new year and cheers to 2024.